Can you hear me? Yes, I guess so. Okay, good afternoon, I guess. Let's try again. Good afternoon. Oh, way better. Good afternoon. Way better. Okay, I could go on forever, but let's move on. I'm going to talk about backends. So we all know that the final customer usually sees the front end. So pixels, animations, colors, and stuff like that. And that's the tip of the iceberg. But behind that, there's a whole world. And when you get to make a choice in that world, that gets even bigger. So let's talk about that, and let's not roll the dice. This is more or less the roadmap for today. So especially I'm going to address which are the needs when you're going to choose a backend for your app, which are the features that you're looking for, and an overview of different approaches and different big backends. It's my first time at DroidCon, so I'm going to spend 20 seconds talking about me. Who am I? I am a user experience designer and developer, mostly focused on iOS. Okay, good. You're cool, guys. Good. But I did some Android in the past, so I know what I'm talking about. In the 90s, and that thing makes me feel kind of old, but in the 90s I did web development. I blog here. This is my Twitter handle. And on app.net I chose to drop the underscore, so just funky boy. Feel free to follow. Enough about me. What about you? How many Android developers? I expect many hands up. Yes. How many iOS developers? Oh, good. No. Good. Windows developers? Not expected, but cool. BlackBerry? Nobody. Web developers in general. Okay, good. So let's define what I'm going to talk about. When I mention app, really I mention a client to some backend. So you might have noticed that 6 years ago the starting point was a web application. Think of Facebook. So they have a web app, and now this cool mobile stuff comes out, and then they make a native, and then HTML, and then native again client for that web app. But it's a few years that this is not true anymore, in the sense that the starting point is usually a mobile application. Think of Instagram. They started right away on mobile, and later they added the web part as a client. And in general, I'm going to talk about apps that need a backend. So if you pick up your phone and you quickly go through all your applications, I think it's fair to say that 80% of those applications are somehow connected to the web. So need at some point, maybe just once, but need to connect to some web server to authenticate, get some data, send some data, and so on and so forth. So whenever I get to choose something, I tend to organize a sort of grid of questions or features, so that I can put all different solutions in this grid and see what's the best fit for my needs. So 5 questions in which we're going to use as a grid. The first one is, when I have to choose a backend, have I to manage that? So sub-questions, if you like, at which level? So do I rent a server with an SSH access and I want to deal with all that kind of stuff? Do I rent a server or a VPS and I just want a web console with restricted access? Am I able to do that? Has my company, somebody in the team, able to do that? If not, have I time to learn that competence? So is it a thing for just this project, or I'm going to recycle this knowledge for future projects? Is it worth it? So how much does that cost? Does it fit the budget, and so on and so forth? Second question, which is technical. So what's the synchronization model between the solution that I'm going to choose? Meaning that, does it match my goal? Can I change the synchronization model? So can I put hands in there? They'll get dirty probably, but I might need that if my client or I have a specific need in some cases. What about protocols? Which protocols, communication protocols are included in the solution? HTTP, TCP, WebSockets, whatever. Third question, have I to pay, or usually how much? But the question is wrong, because the right question is who's to pay? And we'll see that. Sometimes as a developer have not to pay a penny for some solution, because that's on the final customer. And fourth question, impact on the user experience. I strongly believe that every choice that you make when building a product influences somehow the final user experience. The bandwidth, the CPU that you're using on your server, everything somehow is reflecting on the final user experience. And so, for example, this backend that I'm going to choose, does it break any flow? So it asks every 5 minutes to authenticate, or it pops some ad. How frequently? So is it a one-time thing, or every day? And am I okay with whatever is included in this backend? And final question, lock-in, meaning that how can I migrate my data from one service to another? So say that you get started on service A, you ship your application, or you let it run for 5-6 months, and then after a while, for any reason, budget reason, technical reason, whatever, you decide to move to service B. So you will feel weird if I ask you, how pleasant is that? The right question is, how painful is that? Okay? Besides the cost, of course. So, are there switching costs? Has my service, have I to shut down my service for 1 day or 6 hours to do the migration? Do I have to change the code on the front end, or is it okay with that? And so on and so forth. We'll see that. I'm going to talk about a few options here, representative of different approaches and I would say philosophies for the back end. One is iCloud. I'm aware that I'm in the enemy field here, and you probably can file the next slides in Get to Know the Enemy. But I think it's important just to realize how a built-in, just in one ecosystem solution can be helpful or not. So which are the pros and the cons? So iCloud syncs stuff, essentially. This is the super generic definition. And I believe that this was not the official payoff in the marketing message behind iCloud when it was announced 3 years ago, I guess. But I'm pretty sure that on stage Steve Jobs said it just works. And it's usually true for Apple stuff, but in this case I felt I had to add my own sub-message or specification. In that you probably all have seen this gorgeous videos in which you snap a picture and it immediately jumps on the Mac and then on the iPad, and or you enter a contact in the address book and it goes straight to the iPhone, and so on and so forth. You probably do not usually check at the end. There's a disclaimer, and every disclaimer in the world is in a very tiny font, and in this particular case you're not going to be able to read that, but it says sequences accelerated, meaning that this is not true. This is more or less true in the case of iCloud sometimes, because if you are using that kind, or you have used in the past that kind of solution, sometimes you enter something in the calendar and it's supposed to jump to other devices connected to iCloud using the same account, but until you do not open calendar on another device, it's not synced. And we'll see anyway why is that, and what's behind this kind of behavior. So let's apply the 5 questions to iCloud. Have I to manage iCloud? No, at all. It's all, Apple takes care of that. It sits somewhere in Massachusetts in a data farm. They install everything. They take care of bandwidth, scalability, whatever. All you got to do is to learn the API to deal with iCloud, and they are available for the Mac and iOS. What's the synchronization model behind iCloud? Where there's a daemon, so a background process in all the iCloud-enabled devices that monitor changes in a special folder and works on metadata. So it's pretty smart. So if you snap a picture, immediately it sends to the server at least a 1K placeholder. So other devices at least know there's a new picture. The picture might not be there yet, but they are aware that there's something new on the back end. It's shreds file, so it's pretty smart. Again, you edit a document, all the bits that you have changed are sent to the server and not the whole document. And it supports conflict resolution. So, summing up, it's a special folder synced. Synced when appropriate, in that you don't get to decide when the synchronization happens. So, there's no control on that. A mobile device with 2% battery on a GPRS, of course, cannot sync like a Mac plugged into a wall plug. So the operative system decides when to trigger synchronization according to many variables. So battery, signal strength, and so on and so forth. Which kind of information can you store in iCloud? Well, key value store, documents, and core data, which is the way to manage relational information in iOS and the Mac. Who's to pay? The final user. So, as I mentioned before, you don't have to pay anything. As a developer, you don't have to pay anything. No server rental or stuff like that. Your app will use the quota of the final customer. The final customer, when he or she activates iCloud, has 5 gigabytes for free, and if they exceed, they'll pay. So, good for you. Impact on the user interface. Well, this is a one-time thing. You buy an iPhone, iPad, whatever. At the beginning, you're asked, should I turn on iCloud? Yes. Then enter the credential, and you're done. So after that, all the applications that want to use iCloud are essentially iCloud enabled. So there's no impact at all. But there's some on the user expectation. So there's no control on the upload. As I mentioned before, you don't have any control on the syncing, and especially on the upload. So there's no method that you call that says upload file and show me the progress. And this leads to the why isn't there effect on the final user. So I snap my picture in here, why it isn't already on my iPad. And as I mentioned, you usually have to open the app to trigger this syncing mechanism. And this is nasty, what if the user turns off iCloud? So there's a setting in every device that allows the user to turn off iCloud device-wise. So every application iCloud enabled on that device does not get to use iCloud. And that's not nice at all. Lock-in, absolute, I would say, because it's available only on iOS and the Mac. For sake of completeness, as you mentioned, there's a Windows client for iCloud, but you can generate URLs for the contents that you upload on iCloud, but there's no API. So there's no way to say, get me all the stuff that user ABC has stored on iCloud because I want to move it to Dropbox or somewhere else. So you're locked in. Advantages and disadvantages as usual. Let's go to Dropbox. Ever used Dropbox? Okay, pretty well known. It's file-based. So again, it's a special folder kept in sync with a server and across devices. All the devices are connected to the same account. The good thing is that, as opposed to iCloud, supports other platforms. So there's an official client for Linux, for Windows, for Mac OS X, and so on. Let's again apply the questions. Have I to manage that? No, it's already set up. They take care of everything: installation, bandwidth, scalability, redundancy, backup, and so on and so forth. So you just use that. What's the synchronization model? Okay, the official clients continuously sync. So they have some sort of privilege. Whereas mobile apps that use the API have to query the backend. You might get a chance to run some process in the background on Android or iOS that pings the server to get some fresh data. But usually what you have to do, since it's paginated anyway, what you have to do to have the really updated situation is to query the server and retrieve everything. And you use an HTTPS API. And there are SDKs for every platform, so iOS, Android, Ruby, Python, and you name it. What's the synchronization model in this case? Well, first of all, there's no conflict resolution built in. At the API level, every object has a revision field, which is a number, so you could use that to come up with your own solution for conflict resolution. Also, data serialization is up to you. So you have pictures served with metadata and stuff like that. All the data serialization and deserialization is up to you. So you want to store stuff in XML, JSON, or whatever, that's up to you. And there's no file shredding as in iCloud. Who's to pay? Again, the final user. So we're lucky. Yay. Because your app will use this quota of the final customer, which gets 2 GB for free. There's an evil-ish mechanism to get some extra quota for free. After that, you pay. Impact on the user experience. Not that much, I would say. The first time you run an application, the user is asked to allow this application to access a specific folder, for example, or the whole folder, or just a specific folder, and that happens just one time. That's a one-time thing, so it's good, I would say, but the user always sees every file stored in there. So it can change files, which again can be good or bad, and as usual when you are in front of a good or bad question, the answer is yes. You have control on the upload. So here you can call upload this thing and you get the progress callback. So you can show that to the final user. Lock-in, well, none, in that, as I said, the user can move data, files, and whatever everywhere else, essentially. And each user owns, of course, his own data. But Dropbox, in general, is meant for personal or small team usage. So since you store everything on files, there's no database or stuff like that. So if you want to build the next hugely successful social network, probably is not the thing you're looking for. And I picked back, please. Yes, I picked just Dropbox as representative of a whole class of services. So there's Box.net, SugarSync, Google Drive, Amazon S3, Microsoft SkyDrive. More or less, they all belong to the same class. As an alternative, you can roll your own custom backend. I'm sure you're all familiar with this triad: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. And according to the column that you pick in this slide, you have to make a lot or a bit less choices. So in the case you go with infrastructure, with a server, you have many choices to make. Which operative system am I going to install my servers? Which flavor of Linux am I going to install? Which middleware? Which runtime? Is that Ruby, Java, Python, whatever? Which kind of application that presumably uses some kind of framework like Rails or Node.js or whatever? How do I store data? MySQL, Postgres, Mongo, blah, 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 blah. Platform as a service, fewer questions to address. So application, which kind of application do I roll out? And how do I store data? And in the case of software as a service, you usually start immediately writing some code right there. Because everything else has been chosen. So a few examples. In infrastructure as a service, of course, it's also almost impossible to not mention Amazon, also Rackspace and others. In the platform as a service, Roku is very famous. AppFog, you probably have heard of that. And in the software as a service, I'm going to talk about Baasbox, which is an open source solution for this kind of problems. But first, let's focus a second on the platform as a service. So we have two questions to focus on. On which technology do I build my application? So Ruby, Python, blah, blah, blah. And how do I store data? So essentially, which language and possibly which framework and which database? On Roku, for example, very famous platform recently bought by Salesforce, well, recently, more than 1 year ago, I guess, you have a lot of choices. So Ruby and different Ruby flavors, so JRuby and different Ruby versions, Python, Java, Scala, Clojure, Node.js. So if you're out of some of this, you're probably in the Erlang world or something a bit more esoteric. Options for databases, well, Postgres is the default one. Of course, you can use MySQL as an add-on. MongoDB and others are available, again, as an add-on. But on Roku, probably you have stumbled upon the name Dino. Raise your hand if you know what's a Dino. If you know what's a Dino set. Okay, no hands, good. I believe there's a book about this called possibly Reverse Engineering a Dino or something like that, but I'm sure there's a book about this. Anyway, what's a Dino? Nobody knows. It's essentially a process which can be of two kinds. So a web process, so the one facing the HTTP essentially and the request triggered by the customer, or a worker, so a background process. The CFO of your company will ask you this. Does this technological stack that you're going to choose fit our budget? He will ask you that, and you will not be able to answer precisely. There's a formula for that, so the number of dynos plus the DP profile, so the tier of the DB that you have chosen, plus the add-ons. That's your back-end cost. But the point is, it's very, very hard to know in advance how many dynos do you need, which tier of database do you need, which and how many add-ons do you need to run your application. Let's move for a second to the infrastructure as a service, which is even worse decision-wise. So which operative system do I want to run? Ubuntu, CentOS, you name it. Which language am I going to install? And also according to the language, you might have the problem of the interpreter. So it's Java 1.6 or 1.7, is it Ruby 1.9.3 or 2.1 or JRuby and so on and so forth. Which database? So Postgres, MySQL, etc. And also which architecture. So how many machines do I need? One load balancer is enough? I don't know. Which caching system and how many machines dealing with caching? I don't know. Backup, where do we put the backup? I don't know. Bandwidth, how much bandwidth do we need? I don't know, and so on and so forth. So Amazon Web Service, SIS, allows you to do everything. They probably also ship coffee. Well, they actually ship coffee. But they do everything. So content network, CDN, storage, redundant storage with backup, networking, all kinds of databases, and also services. So you want to send an email, good. You need a queue manager, great, we have it. But again, it's even worse than a Roku, I guess, because you have to combine many more variables. And so it's kind of difficult to have a cost estimation in advance. That's why you usually start with these kind of things, and then after a while you realize it's too expensive, and then you need to migrate. And this is in preparation of what's coming, which is migration. Anyway, before that, you can go the good old way. So, and again, I'm going to mention in the 90s, so that makes me feel a bit old. Axl Rose was a skinny guy at that time. Anyway, you used to buy a server, hardware, you know, stuff that you touch. And so besides the operative system and all the rest, you also had to pick the hardware. So which CPU, which kind of RAM, hard disk, and so on and so forth. Plus that, you're going to rent some space in a farm and bandwidth. You laughed, and that's fine. I understand. But there are famous services running on their own hardware. GitHub is one of them. They have their own, well, not their own data farm, but I'm sure they run on their own servers. So they get to choose also the kind of screws that close the box of each server. 37 Signals, that I should say now, Basecamp they run their own servers. And in spite of the fact that Jeff Bezos of Amazon has invested in 37 Signals. So we laugh, and that's fine, but it's not so uncommon that big players still run their own hardware. And then in the last 2 years, I would say, you probably have heard of this. So backend as a service. Highly specialized solutions focused mostly on mobile applications. So the development of the server side of mobile applications. They usually come with a lot, well, with some standard set of features. So file management, upload, download, and so on and so forth, database or key value stores, a set of SDKs that wrap the API, usually a RESTful/like API, push notification support, analytics, and extra add-ons. User management is usually built in, so you do not have to create your table or object to represent user. You just start typing code that requires username and password, and you get back a JSON or XML or whatever. So you start right away. You don't have to configure anything. So they manage, as I said, account creation and verification, social login, so you can log in with Twitter or Facebook if you like, and access control lists. So depending on the technology behind that, you can create groups, or also at record level, you can define who has access, which kind of users, or which list of users have access to a specific record. The focus of this kind of solutions is time to market, for example. So you want to stay focused on the front end. You do not want to guess what's the right name of the header of that particular call that it's supposed to do the login or the sign up. That should be somehow already taken care of somewhere, for example, in the SDK. Or they should give you an example to copy and paste. You want to focus on what the user sees. So the pixels, the color, the stroke of a line, the layout, whatever, but not the back-end side of things. There are lots of services in this space, so I'm going to mention a few. Cloud9 is one. StackMob, which has been recently bought by PayPal, I guess. Kingvey, Parse.com, which 1 year ago more or less was bought by Facebook, Sench.io, and there are many more. With all the services, what you do usually when you start using them is to sign a block pact. Let's now for a second go back to the how painful it is thing. Try to pick one of these, roll a solution, ship an application for 6 months, and then just for fun, if you like, move to another one and see what happens. So you probably have to export data and come up with a script that converts that data to the new format of service B. And if you have a billion records, how long that script is going to take, you'll probably have to shut down the service in production to do the migration. So, as I said, it's not easy and nice. And here comes Baasbox. So Baasbox is an open source product, a mobile backend as a service, a mobile backend tool that allows you to build and simplify the way you build a server side of anything, so web applications or mobile application. It even runs on Raspberry Pi. Come to the hackathon if you want to see that. And the aim is to simplify as much as possible the startup time. So you don't have to choose which application server you want to run. So no Ruby, Python, Java, blah, blah, blah choice. You don't have to choose which database you're going to run. You just need a Java virtual machine installed. That's all. But don't get scared. I mean, you don't have to write Java code, well, unless you're building an Android client. That's the point. JVM is just needed to run Baasbox. And it runs everywhere, as I've mentioned. It comes with user management, so right away you start writing code to log in or sign up, and you get back some JSON or some already parsed data model object. It supports access control lists. It has collections. You can think of that as sort of the same class buckets. So you create, I don't know, blog posts that go into one collection and comments in another one. It supports files, upload and download with attached data. So you can attach metadata, custom metadata to a file. It supports push notifications on iOS and Android. And let's talk for a second about the box part of the name. It really is a box. So you go to the website, even right now, baasbox.com, you download the zip, you unpack it, and you run this start script. And that's all. It's ready there, working. So you start right away to CURL or download an SDK and start developing your application. For example, in case you ask, this is the way you should install it on a CentOS. You install Java, you copy Baasbox on the remote machine, and you run start. So that's all. For example, Baasbox is now in production on a product named PizzaBox, and Baasbox orchestrates between three actors. So one is you, the developer, that's the administrator, or essentially of everything, so he sees everything on one side. On the other side, there's a pizza owner guy, which has a web console that allows to manage orders. So ship this or delay this for a second, notify that this is going to be delivered, and so on. And of course, the final users. The final users can use, at the moment, an iOS application like this. An Android version is under development and will be released soon. So the final user browses the menu, picks pizza and a beverage, and places an order. That's all. And gets push notifications every time the order changes state. I've mentioned CURL, so it's very simple. For example, this is the way you should upload a file. You provide the file and name, the session token, and the endpoint. Easy peasy. This is the way we built the developers built the menu. So a list of JSON objects, and again, you see the flexibility. You can put anything you like in here, and you can also create orders. So again, lists, assign them that, associate that to a user. Have a time, a total, and so on and so forth. And now I'm going to show Dear Diary, which is a bit simpler application, an Android application, which essentially allows you to keep a diary. So You log in at first, you write a few entries, and then let's say you lose your phone. You buy a new one. What you expect is log in again, and all your content is in there. Okay, so that's the point. This is a small example, for example, of the sign up code. As you can see, is very, very simple. Just a few lines. This is the way you load all the posts in your diary. Again, very, very easy. And I'd like to show you a quick demo of that. Let's see. First of all, I think I should mirror. Okay. No need for slides at the moment. No need of this at the moment. Okay. What I have here is the application, and I'd like just to show you the configuration part. You see that? Yes. So this is a one-time thing. You provide the IP or web address of your endpoint and the port in which Baasbox is going to respond, and that's all. I won't show you the rest of the code. I will rather show you this, which is a bit more interesting. So here I have Baasbox 1. So I have two instances of Baasbox, and you should imagine them as on two different servers. Okay. As I said, just the start allows you to run Baasbox on one server. So this is running. I should probably do something like this. No. I just wanted to show you the port. No, this way is not visible. Anyway, it's 9000. So if I go to the console here, now I am the administrator, so I'm using default values for this. And this is what the administrator sees. I just have one collection which has 0 records. So that's all. Now I'm going to run this application on the simulator and see what happens. I'm on Gradle. Yes. And here we go. So sign in. There's nothing in the database, so I'm going to register. Already registered. Now let's add a note and save it. And here's my note. So now I'm going to unfortunately lose my phone. Let's simulate that by by just deleting the application. Okay. And moreover, so kind of double demo if you like. Here again, Baasbox 1 and Baasbox 2. So you should imagine two different windows open in FTP, let's say, on two different servers. This is what the current situation on Baasbox 1. All I have to do is to copy this in this directory here. I can shut down this one, so this is Baasbox 1, and start Baasbox 2. You can imagine this as a sort of changing DNS essentially. So far it pointed somewhere, and now it's going to point to somewhere else. No worries. So this port dance is just meant to allow me to show two different servers on the same machine, because as you can see, I'm offline essentially, and I didn't want to run a demo live. And now I'm going to build again. I just changed the number of port. So what you did essentially is pointing to another IP, pointing your DNS on to another IP. And let's see how it goes. This time, same credentials, but login. And there's my note. So it's that simple. Zip the database, move it somewhere else, and you're good to go. No pain, no coming up with smart scripts to convert data or stuff like that. It's very, very simple, and as I've mentioned, you do not even need to change the client-side code. Let's go back to the slides. Closing remarks. So we're now, this is open source under the very permissive Apache 2 license, so feel free to download that. Now we're working on a service. So we'll set up a service, and as a service based on Baasbox. And as feature-wise, we're going to work on server-side code and business analytics as features. You probably know there's a hackathon during the weekend. We really invite you to check out Baasbox as a starting point for whatever project your mind comes up with. These are all the contacts. The latest version 0.7.3 is available right now with all the SDKs, with iOS, Android, and JavaScript SDKs. And that's all I have. So thank you. I think there's no time for questions, but we are here. We have a booth downstairs. We are sponsoring the conference, and we are at the hackathon. So there will be a chance to chat if you like. No, ma lo sapevo che finiva così.